We are huge fans of the Castleberry family, and we're excited to see what God is doing here in Canton. And you guys should know, be forewarned that God does love you, but Nathan has a plan for your life. So, and you probably are sensing that already. All the volunteers in the back going, yes, 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 he does. And so we have loved them, and talking about the man behind the person. I mean, Nathan Castleberry, the Lowe family, we're just all, we're all huge fans. And he called me a couple months ago and he goes, I'm going to do a series and I'd like for you to be a part of it because I work with married couples. And he said, it's called It's Complicated, How Jesus Moves Things from Complicated to Clear. And I don't know about you guys right now, but anything that feels like it can make things less complicated, I am all about it. Even the most simple things right now have become so complicated, even how you greet people, right? You walk up and I'm a hugger and I'm going to walk up and I'm like, hey, how's it going? Fist bump and all that. Even the simplest of things has become so complicated. But on a more serious note, there is something that is super complicated that we have to figure out, I think as a nation, how to do this, how to make it more simple because it is impacting our day-to-day lives. And that thing is television. Television has become very, very complicated, has it not? I grew up in a little tiny town in Alabama, and we had 3 channels, and one of them was kind of fuzzy, so it wasn't that hard. Right now, for television, when you go on there, I counted this morning, and we have 28 different platforms on there to choose from with thousands of options. And I don't know about you, but the thing that stresses me out about that complication is I like to know all my options before I make a decision. Anybody? That has become physically impossible. And it drives me crazy. And Nancy and I talk about, she's just like, it's not that big a deal. Let's just do what Netflix has come out with. Have you seen this? Play something. Of all the things of 2020 that I was appalled with the most, the play something button was probably the thing I was most in shock and awe over. I can't just play something. We're about to dedicate 8 to 9 months of our lives to this. It can't just push play something. That's ludicrous. That is absolutely ludicrous. I tell you, the other thing that's become very, very complicated. It's glorious and it's great in its way, but it's become very complicated, made things very complicated, is Amazon. Do you remember when Amazon just sold books? I remember when I first started working with married couples, it was like in 2001, and we got hired at a church as a director of married life, and we'd been married about 6 years, and we weren't great at it. But, I was going to learn. And so I went into the bookstore. Nathan, a bookstore, it's kind of like a library, but you have to buy the books. That's how that works. But I remember walking in, I thought, I'm going to learn everything I can. And I remember walking up to the marriage section and there being like 100 books and being completely overwhelmed, thinking on a couple different levels going, how am I going to learn? Like, which book do I choose? And then my heart started breaking for the person who wants to make their marriage better, but they don't really know how. And they think, well, maybe I could go get a book. And they walked in and they saw the 100 books and they were like, forget it. I don't guess I don't know how to choose through this. If you go on Amazon and you search now for marriage books, there's over 100,000 marriage books. That would be like walking into Barnes & Noble and it being 5 times as big, and every book in the store is a marriage book. Can you imagine how overwhelming that is when people go and I just want to make my marriage better, and they go on there and they see all the books? The great thing is if you're a Christian, it gets greatly diminished if you put Christian marriage books. There's only 20,000 marriage books. 20,000 marriage books, talking about complicated. And so when Nathan told me about this series of marriage, my life mantra ever since I've started this whole thing was that marriage is easier than you think. In fact, I thought the last thing the world needs is another marriage book, so I wrote one. The funny thing is, the publisher brought it to me, and it was pretty thin. It was a pretty big font with pictures, and it was only 100 pages. And so I was like, no, that's all I know after 15 years. That's pretty much it. And probably shouldn't have added it all. But I told the author and the publisher, I said, I want the title of this thing, the subtitle, to be called Marriage is Easier Than You Think, because I believe that with everything in my heart. And now if you go to Amazon and you put that on, the other day I went there and it was number 3. And then right next to it was the farting animal coloring book. which, as you can see, unlike my book, is a bestseller. These are the days that I know Jesus loves me. Some people want signs from God like rainbows, and I want farting animal coloring books as bestsellers next to my book. That's what I want. But I want you to see the title of this thing, the subtitle. It's Marriage is Easier Than You Think, because here's the thing, and I believe this with every fiber of my being. While God's way to love each other may not be easy to live out, it is easy to understand. And that's what not only Scripture shows us, it's what research of every kind shows us, that the way we love each other is easier than we've been led to believe, that it's really not as complex as we think it is. And that's great news, because you are married to somebody. Those of you who are married, you have this principles work for any relationship that you value. The person that you value, that person, your spouse, they are very complicated. And if they haven't told you yet, you are very complicated. And your situations are very, very complicated. But in the midst of all that, how we love each other is not. And that is really, really good news. And God doesn't give us a lot of verses on marriage. In fact, it may be the only time in the Bible where the author just punts. Paul says marriage, it's a mystery. So I think, well, maybe he knew how complicated it was going to be, how complicated we are going to be, and when two people become one person, that was going to be complicated. So he gives us simple instructions on how to do that. So we're going to look at one of those verses. It's from Ephesians 5:21. Now here's the thing about this. If you've been around church for a while, or if you've read a marriage book, or you've been to a marriage retreat, someone has probably taught out of Ephesians 5. And we get into all these complicated verses of men's roles and women's roles, and there's all this tension there. But the thing I think we do is a disservice, and I did this for years, is we don't back up enough and we don't start at the beginning of this thing. You see, Paul, the way he would communicate, who wrote most of the New Testament, Paul would write letters to brand new believers. And this was a group of brand new believers, and he's penned letters about lots of things, but one of the things he put in there is, here's how you do marriage. So it doesn't get any clearer than this, that this is how we do this. But this is the first verse that he leads off with. It sometimes I think we just skip right by. And again, I did that for years, and a few years ago, it just nailed me that this really is it. If we can get this, and not only as a married couple, but if we can get this with the people that are closest to us, it can radically change everything. And if you've got something great, it can protect it. And it can take things from bad to good and good to great. And again, it's from Ephesians 5:21. He says this: submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Some of you going, submit? What's the option? Is there another option? Submit? That doesn't sound very great. Does that mean what I think it does? Does that mean I put their needs ahead of my own? Yeah, that's what that means. That when we think about life, when we think about marriage, and we think about situations, and we think about how we talk to each other, that there's this lens that he says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. In other words, it's made up of a couple that says you first, no you first, no you first. Or as Pastor Andy Stanley says, it's a race to the back of the line. And that is a radical upside down way of looking at things. And we're going to talk about how to do that. But first, here's why I think that we don't. Here's why I think when we see that verse and we say, hey, I've got to put my spouse's needs ahead of my own, I think there's this knee-jerk reaction to it, because I think for us that somewhere along the way, and maybe it's just natural in how we're wired, there's something in us that wants to be very, very self-protective of ourselves. I call it the for me mindset. And the for me mindset is always asking a question. Is this marriage working for me? Is this working? We could also call this the cohabitation mindset. People live together because they're scared to death that if I get married and it falls apart, so much hangs in the balance. So we need to see if this is working. So they live together and they ask the question constantly, is this working? Because if it's not working, we can get out. And then they get married and they don't change the question. And then I think culture just teaches us to say, is this working for me? And when that's the lens of things, and that's when we get into trouble, and that's when things start to fall apart. Because here's the thing, and it is tricky, because a lot of times people that are very, very different marry each other, don't they? Some of you are going, hallelujah, amen. Yeah, a lot of times savers will marry spenders, and here's what happens. Those savers will rob joy from those spenders. That's how that happens. Have you guys heard of Dave Ramsey? I don't like him. I do believe he is systematically robbing people of good times and good things. I'm writing a new curriculum. It's called Ramsey Busters. Living like Jesus is coming back tomorrow. I've got scripture, Nathan. If you love Jesus, swipe your thesis, right? And that gets a little complicated, doesn't it? It gets a little complicated. So if you are the saver and your spender does that thing they did again and they spend something that you didn't talk about and you ask the question, is this working for me? What's the answer? When the answer is no, it postures us in a way to react in a way that pushes him away. When the answer is no to that question, is this working for me? It postures us in a way to react in a way that pushes them away. There's a marriage researcher, Dr. John Gottman. He's done amazing, amazing research. And he says, and what he'll do is he observes couples. And he'll look and say, here's what couples that are healthy are doing. Here's what couples that are struggling are doing. And for the couples that are really struggling, it really turns out it's about them. And they do what he calls the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Do you think he was trying to make a point with that title? Is he wants to know that this are the 4 things that lead people toward divorce. In fact, he has this thing where he can predict divorce within 90% within like 45 minutes to an hour. And these couples are doing one or all 4 of these. And because they're asking the question, is this working for me? And I'm going to let you know that it's not by being critical of you. Are you kidding me right now? I can't believe that you just did that. Contempt takes it another level. It's name calling. It's hateful. It's hurtful. That's actually the biggest determinant of what causes divorce. The other is defensiveness. Well, I did that. Well, you did this. And the thing I did wasn't nearly as big as the thing you did. And then there's just stonewalling where people shut down like a Kmart, right? You just go really, really too soon. And you just, right? Thanks, Nathan. That was just for the 2 of us. Stonewalling. I'm not going to talk about this right now. Or I don't want to, I'm going to emotionally shut down for me because we're looking through this lens of this is not working for me and I'm going to let you know it. And we respond in a way that pushes them away. There's other differences. What are some other examples? I always feel like people marry kind of their messy and clean opposite. Because a lot of times very, very neat and tidy people who believe everything has a place and everything should be in its place, a lot of times those people marry normal people. My wife is so neat, our junk drawer has dividers, which I tried to explain to her makes it by its very essence not a junk drawer. Yeah, some of you walk into a room, looks fine. The other one walks in and goes, this place is totally destroyed. We can marry our opposite, and couples can have tension about this. But there's a different mindset. What is another mindset that we could have? What is something else? What is a different way to look in this? Call it the for us mindset. And it's birthed out of this verse. It's birthed out of saying, this is for us. And you say, wait a minute, I thought we were just talking about one spouse focusing on their other spouse. But no, this is what's best not only for your spouse, this is what's best for you. This is what's best for your us. Because even if we were thinking about this from a selfish standpoint, you go, what's the best thing you can do for you to enjoy your relationship? It is to put your spouse's needs ahead of your own. That's why you can see non-Christian marriages that can sometimes look better than Christian marriages because they're living out this thing of putting each other first. Is you say, I'm going to ask a whole different question. And then ask this question, what am I doing to make this marriage work? This is a whole different paradigm shift. What am I doing? Watch that. What am I doing to make this marriage work? And all of a sudden, you're back in the driver's seat. Because most marital advice that you see will say, as a couple, you need to go do fill in the blank. Here's the problem with that. In marriage, you typically got one that wants to work on it more than the other one, or they're at different places, and then people are totally defeated. At the end of the day, what this does is says, I'm not thinking about me, I'm thinking about her, I'm thinking about him, and I'm going to put their needs ahead of my own. It's an upside down economy. And what we push back on and we go, well, that's not fair. That's not just. What if they take advantage of me? What about my rights? Right? That's what we feel. And this is upside down and it's uncomfortable, but it is beautiful. And when you see somebody live this out, and we've seen people that live this out, it's beautiful, isn't it? I mean, think about it. Take it out of the concept of marriage for a minute. Who is that person that you know that always puts you ahead of them? Are you drawn to them? Yes, you seek them out. Who is that person or who's that couple that you see? Maybe you are this couple. You see how they treat each other and you go, I want that. And we're drawn to them as a couple, and we're drawn to them as individuals because they get this. They just put each other's needs ahead of our own. Now let's go back with this mindset. Let's go back to this spending, saving thing. Now you're the saver, and the spender's just done this thing. They've just done it again. The question is, in that moment, you ask yourself, what am I doing to make this marriage work? And I think this is when we invite God into the equation, going, okay, God, what is my correct response? Because here's what couples can tend to do. They only talk about things when they're fighting about things. And their brains and their bodies are set up to make them lose. They only talk about money when there's a conflict about money. One of the best things you can do to make your marriage work is to pull back, to calm down, to pray about it, think about it, and talk about it when your brain and your body and your heart is on your side. So you're saying, but wait a minute, I'm the one that knows more about finances, right? I am right about this. They're wrong about this, and you're probably right. But it's all about the approach. When you go to them, at the end of the conversation, do they know that you care more about them than money? I had a lady say to me one time, she goes, I just want to know that I'm more important to him than what we're talking about. Regardless of the topic, however you approach it, at the end of the day, what are you doing as an individual to make it work? And it's always based off this thing of submission, because you think about this. It's submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. There is a fuel now that comes with this. There's a fuel that comes with this, that we're asked to do this thing that feels uncomfortable. And God goes, well, wait a minute. You need some fuel for that? When it doesn't feel comfortable, I'm going to give you some fuel for that. This is going to flow out of your reverence for Christ. Now, growing up, the only time I heard the word reverent, it was you need to be reverent in church. In other words, when you walked into the church, you need to be quiet. You needed to be calm. In other words, Ted, don't be you. Right? It is, and this is reverence for Christ. This is awe of Jesus. And think about this. This submission that he's asking us to do flows out of the ultimate act of submission that has ever and will ever be. There's never will be another huger act of submission, because you think about what Jesus said when he knew what was about to happen. He knew what was about to happen on the cross. What did he say? God, please, Father, if there's any other way, but if not my will, your will. And it was this ultimate form of submission. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I forget about the reverence and the awe of that and the unbelievable part of that. And that's why I love praise and worship. It's what it does is it takes our normal week, right? And it makes us stop and go, wow, Jesus, I'm reminded that you rescued me. I'm reminded that when I was, what does he say? While you were still sinners, I saved you. And in light of who you are, I'm going to stand, I'm going, and what's so amazing about the awe of that, it's kind of like standing in front of the ocean and trying to wrap your brain around it. Like you're going, wow, I don't know what to do with this. And he goes, how do we respond to that? Because what Jesus did, his act of submission demands a response from us. As believers, it demands a response. And the how of that wow is submit. What do I do with this? It's these little moments. Right? It's what I call micro moments. Marriages are not made up of the big things. They're made up of these little micro moments of how you're talking to each other and how you're responding to each other and how you treat each other. And it is beautiful. So all of a sudden, this thing that feels like, ugh, I don't want to do that, or that doesn't feel good, there's this beauty to it to go, Jesus, my response to my wife is not based on her response to me. It's based on your response to me. And that's a whole different lens. And all of a sudden, fairness is out the window. It's a whole different thing. What am I doing to make this marriage work? What if it's other examples like time? People will fight about, you watch people fight about these silly things. They'll fight about, they were 5 minutes late or 10 minutes late. I'm going to talk to those of you that are late, though, that drive your spouse crazy. People go, marriage is so complicated. No, it's not. If you being late drives your spouse crazy, watch this. Don't be late. Since the sundial, there's been a concept of time. Get yourself a watch, right? And now, those of you timely people went, yeah, get them. Now, let me talk to you for a little bit. You need to pull an Elsa sometimes and just let it go, people. You need to let that go. We have some dear family friends, the wolves, and we call it wolf time. The wolves will get there, when they get there. But we're always excited when they do. Why? Because they're great. And you know why they're late? Because they're the most present people you'll ever be around. They don't think about the next thing because they are in the middle of their favorite thing, you. And they're on wolf time, so we just lie to them and tell them to get there 2 hours earlier than they should. But when we think about this lens of having a different mindset on how to view marriage and how to do life, what is your mindset? Because you think about that think about your spouse. Why are they late? Because what we typically do is you're just irresponsible. Again, contempt and being critical. Maybe they're late because they're always present. What is the most generous explanation that you can give for your spouse's behavior and then believe it and act on it? Because here's the thing, isn't that what we want? We know how to love them because we know how we want to be loved. We go, it's so complicated. No. We know in this situation how we'd want to feel loved. I had a friend that was telling me he and his wife had really been struggling. They were going to a marriage counselor, and each week they would kind of each get to bring up a topic, and then they would process through that. And he said it was his turn, and he was so excited. He goes, this thing we've been struggling with for years, I'm going to bring it up to this counselor, and you know what this counselor's going to do? She's going to get her. He said, and I thought, boy, this is going to be a big ticket item. And he goes, every day when I come home from work, I trip over her computer bag from work. Every day she just drops it right there in the floor, and there's a hook on the wall. And all she has to do is hang it up on the hook, and it would take her 1, 2, 3 seconds. And the counselor says, with not an ounce of sarcasm, oh, this is really great news for you. So what? He goes, yes, every day your wife is giving you an opportunity to communicate unconditional love. And it's only going to take you 1, 2, 3 seconds. It's a mind. And he goes, I was a little embarrassed. He goes, but at the end of the day, now I love it. Now I love it when I trip over the bag because it is an opportunity. And I think so many times we can push our spouse in a way, we can respond in a way that pushes them away. That things that would take us 3 seconds to make a difference, to let things go. You know, my wife's love language is acts of service. And so I know one of the ways she doesn't want flowers, she wants to open the dishwasher and it be magically empty. And I got to tell you, every time that I see the dishwasher, it is a moral dilemma for me. I would rather build a log cabin than unload the dishwasher. I don't know what it is. I don't know what's going down. I don't know what Satan does in that moment, but I'm like, I hate this. So I'm a little competitive, so I just put myself on a timer to see how quickly I can do it. My record's like 2:30 through 36. And I think 2 minutes and 36 seconds, and it makes her so happy. Right? It takes me 2 minutes and 36 seconds. What are those things that would take you 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 2 minutes and 36 seconds that would make them just so happy? Because if they're going to know a life of love and encouragement and connection, it's going to be because you are giving it to them. You're the boss of you. That's the beauty about this whole thing. When we're talking about what am I doing to make this marriage work, I'm only in control of me. And some of you have been really glad that your spouse is hearing this right now. And I'm only talking to you. Right? It just changes things. I will say this. I got to give credit where credit's due. And my whole family's here so they can contest to this. I was ADHD long before it was cool to be. Long before it was a thing. You know, all I know is my dad was often asking me, what were you thinking? I wasn't thinking anything. There was nothing there. I would just do this thing. Well, it has remained with me, and I will do things that are so frustrating to me, and they have to be so frustrating for her. I mean, things that I'm embarrassed to tell you. I will lose my phone at least 12 times a day. My family's all there. Will you call my phone? I would do it on my Apple Watch, but I can't find it. Right? It's just those things. I've gotten off an airplane before and left my roller bag and just drove home, and I went, I think I left my bag. Let me give you this winter, and then you're probably going to stop listening to me. This is how bad I am. The other day, I grill out. We're sitting there for dinner. Nancy goes, did you turn the gas on the grill off? And I was like, yeah. Keep eating. A little bit later, I go out. I put the cover on the grill. My daughter comes and she goes, the grill's smoking for some reason. Not only did I not turn the gas off, I didn't turn the burners off. And I put the cover on it. Here's what she could have said, and nobody in this room or on the planet would have blamed her. Are you kidding me right now? I told you, I asked you point blank, did you turn the gas off? I asked you right there, and you just went, yeah, I did. Right? And that grill's not that old. And then you just melted the cover on it. Great, fantastic, wonderful. And you know what? She could have done that, and no one would have blamed her. But you know what? Here's the reality. She didn't have to do that because I was already doing that in my head. So many times we do this thing where we say this thing and we point out all these things as if they don't feel bad about it enough as it is. They already get it. We don't need to point it out. We get to choose how we treat them. It's our choice. And she's been so great at that. And I asked her one day, I said, how are you able to do this? Because this is the most organized woman on the planet. She has a master's of accounting degree. I mean, she is very organized. Trunk drawer, dividers, you get it. And I said, when do you do? And she says, because you're so sweet to me. And I don't say that to go, oh, look at the Lowes. No. I say that because when we first got married and we went into this journey of how do you have a great marriage, we weren't there. We would have so many moments of just being unkind. And just mistakes like this, that we would just get frustrated about this. I'm convinced if you would apply this principle over your spouse's mistakes, just that. I mean, you can pick these big ticket items. You can say, hey, I need to do something about how I talk about money or how we talk about money and how we talk about sex and how we talk about time and all these different things. But I think I'm just going to apply it to the times they make mistakes. Because here's the thing. They're married to somebody that's going to make mistakes too. What if you applied this to this when they made a mistake? What if you gave them a break? Because you have a choice to do it. We got a choice. And isn't that great news of this thing? So I'll close with this. Again, read more marriage books and done more study on marriage than I have brain cells. But this was one of the things that I thought, see, this is what makes marriage simple and beautiful. This lady, her husband had just passed away. And she wrote this blog. She says, the day my husband left for Earth, all my marriage problems vanished. There was no one to fuss at or to negotiate with. She said, I wanted a perfect husband who acted how I wanted. And if that didn't happen, well, jerk wife was in full effect. If only he could understand how right I was and how wrong he'd always be. I needed to instruct him, question him, and remind him of his shortcomings. After all, wasn't I his helpmate? The reality is, I wasn't helping him or our marriage. By pointing out each fault, I was poisoning the relationship. Oh, it was still a good marriage, and we deeply loved each other, but it was not what it could have been. And now it was too late. She says, days after his funeral, I stared at our dirty clothes basket that sat atop our dryer, knowing his clothes were inside. Before me was the last load of laundry I would ever wash for this sweet man. There would be no more dirty socks to pick up around the house, ever. I thought, how many times had my husband kept quiet, listened, and endured? He shared no list of ways that I needed refinement. He simply loved me. She said, but God, the lover of my soul, in his mercy, later gave me a special gift. He's allowed me to love again, to wear a second wedding dress and be a better wife. She said, I married a wonderful man. I could still be a jerk wife, but I'm working on it. And now I strive to hug more and nag less. My goal is to make him feel respected, important, and valued. I want to live love. She said, recently I walked into the master bedroom and I stopped, nearly bursting into tears. She said, I saw a pile of dirty clothes that my new husband had abandoned on the floor. As I stared at the pile, I smiled. I knew he had hurried to change out of work clothes into comfy clothes so he could spend time with his new family. He had chosen what was more important. I happily scooped the treasures into my arms and carried them to the washing machine. I get to do this. I get to serve. I get to live with a wonderful man who ditches laundry for people. At the end of the day, this is what it's about. Our spouse gets to live with somebody that made choices. I'm just going to love radically. Jesus, I don't know what to do. Well, what you did for me, but you told me what to do, so I'm going to do that. We get a choice, and it is beautiful when we make the right one. Let me pray for you.